Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of The Era, where we really go deep on the fundamental hypothesis that the employee experience is really a key driver of business outcomes and ultimately success in any business. And this is really the conversation that post-pandemic is we're in this kind of future of work era where we're figuring out what are the rhythms that we're going to use going forward. It's the conversation that's dominating the C-suite and boardrooms really across the world. And we are so excited to have Teresa Mitrovic, the managing partner and founder of Oro Collective, with us today. And just by way of background, Oro Collective's mission is to help teams establish psychological safety to where peak performance of the individual and the team becomes a natural rhythm of the business. Teresa is also the author of The Currency of Connection, a book which explores how to create energized and resilient teams and build a genuinely human workplace. I mean, that sounds great. What a great focus on bringing some trust and humanity back into the workplace. So check out Oro Collective and the book The Currency of Connection. So love this. Teresa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's such a pleasure, Brad. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to jump in, and Teresa is she gets an extra gold star today because it's very, very early in Australia, and so she is up early and ready to go on a podcast. So thank you.
My pleasure.
So Teresa, let's jump in and talk a little bit about how you arrived at this moment. You've got really deep professional experience at large and very, very prominent companies with Disney and Hasbro. How did that lead you to founding the Oro Collective? Like, what's that journey
Mm,
like, and how did it bring you to this moment?
okay, great question. It was actually Hasbro. It was actually a coaching as a manager course at Hasbro that I was super reluctant to go on. That really is where my world pivoted, basically. Um, the senior leadership team were all I'm going to say forced to go on this coaching and manager course. I was a typical A type, super busy, super, um, super determined leader. And I really couldn't afford 3 days out of the office, but I did it anyway. And it was the experience that gave me uh, and the lessons it taught me and the breakthroughs that we had at work. So if I tell you that we had 9 months to run to the end of our financial year, we tripled our profit. The team worked 90 minutes less every day. I was working 2 hours less every day. So thinking about employee experience, getting your work done in less hours, right? And as a human, I was a single parent at the time, so it was amazing for me. Um, and the quality of our work improved dramatically, and the morale in the team was just phenomenal. And at that point, I thought to myself, it's had such a dramatic impact. These concepts that I thought were really simple and pedestrian and just too simple to be effective, have had such a dramatic impact on my experience, my team's experience, and on the profit, the bottom line of the organization. Um, that it's hard to ignore. It's hard to diminish. And at that point, I thought, I very nearly missed out on this, and I very nearly missed out on giving this to the team and to the organization. So how do I get to a place where I can help people who are like me? Um, Embrace these concepts and actually put them into practice so that they can get the same results and the same gains that we did. So that's kind of where it started.
That's incredible, Teresa. So it all came back from 72 hours where you were forced to go to to basically a coaching course or whatever, however
Hmm.
it was
Yeah,
structured.
an offsite coaching course. Yeah.
And then light bulb went off for you and the team, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And I've used what I learned there in every role I've had since. So from head of marketing at Hasbro, I did a small stint in a recruitment company, and then which taught me all about client relationships. Um, and then I went into a country manager role for the Walt Disney Company in New Zealand, and I took a lot of what I'd learned into that role, and we had phenomenal success. So that was a turnaround role. And so the skills that I learned I've carried through every job that I've had. So Universal Pictures in London, I was able to broker things that had never been done before. So the skills that you learn stay with you. It's like they said, when your mind has been stretched by something, it can't go back to its original shape. And what struck me is it's not just about the outcomes that you get. It's about the way it creates it's incredible ease in your life, and when you have ease, you're more able to be compassionate with people around you. You're more able to roll with what is. You can adapt, and rather than having to kind of react to things constantly. So it makes a really big difference.
Teresa, I can see why you are really, really good at what you do. I'm ready to go and get coached up. And it's funny because uh, a few college students who I'm kind of mentoring informally, and and they really want to play dot to dot with careers. They really want to be like, I do this, and then this happens, and then this happens, and they want to just go dot to dot. And I'm trying to help them understand that is not the way your professional life is going to unfold. It is kind of built experience on experience, and like you said, you learn something, and now I can't go back to the way I behaved in my structure before. But what an exciting professional journey you've had that's just unfolded this kind of step by step.
It was amazing. I've been really lucky to have some incredible experiences globally and work with the best people, the very best people. So I'm very lucky. But I hear what you're saying about, careers aren't linear. They're not step to step. I think maybe they used to be, maybe 50 years ago, but they're not now. And that's not what growth looks like. That's not what development looks like. And I think part of what I love about being involved in the working world, because people say to me, why don't you just be a life coach? And wow, but what I'd be missing out on this incredible experience of being able to work with leaders to change the shape of the work environment, which is where we spend most of our time anyway, right? And I think particularly for college graduates or college students, when they think about their careers, it's almost like you've got to stay really open to the possibility, and you can't do that if you're mapping it out. So it's great to have a vision of where you want to go, but let the journey unfold in front of you, because incredible things happen when you focus on following your nose, doing what you love, and being constantly in a state of growth and development.
And so as you think about this and you think about
Mm.
the experience that recent college graduates or 20-year professionals are having, like in your words, how do you think about employee experience?
So, in the simplest terms, I think employee experience it's almost like a give and take contract, or it's a dynamic relationship, right?
Interesting.
Employee experience is either adaptive and growth oriented and a positive experience, or it's maladaptive, stunting, and detrimental. So the employee experience we have, so employee experience for me is really around that exchange of value. What do we get? What do we give?
Hmm.
And what does it feel like while we're doing that?
And okay, so this on this exchange of value,
Yeah.
you've got this rich global experience where you've worked internationally, globally, pretty much your entire career. What differences do you see in different markets? And is there a one size fits all approach to employee experience in this, or how do you think about that with your global kind of experience set?
So there are differences in terms of. So I think part of employee experience might also be the employee contract. So we have employment contracts, right, which are all written down, but then we have this other employment contract that is it's not expressed. So it's this hidden kind of expectation that we have of what our company is going to give us. That absolutely changes depending on whether you're in Australia, NZ, London. And so those are the three areas. Those are the three cities where I've worked, and there are some very definite differentiations between the three. What I love about the UK is that in August to summer, so August, pretty much everything goes quiet, right? No one's expected to respond to anything. There's this mass expectation across the country that everyone's allowed to go on holiday. You don't get that in NZ, and you don't get it in Australia. Um, but then when you look at the UK, people work some really crazy long hours in London, and you do have to do that. London's a very, it's got that same kind of vibe as New York, right? It's very go go go. It's on all the time. So you feel like if you're not at the top of your game, then you're rapidly losing relevance. So there's no margin. In NZ and Australia, it's a lot more relaxed. It's a lot more collegiate, and so the experience that you expect to have is more. It's more relaxed and more friendly, which is nice, but it can sometimes make it hard to get accountability right. So there's kind of always there's these slight differences culturally between different markets, or different cities. But what is consistent is, I think, what people want from the experience. So I think what people want from the experience is to be able to do good work, be appreciated for it, have an opportunity to grow, and to continually develop. And so I think that is standard across all the markets that I've been in. Um, and what changes is the cultural dynamic that exists within the workplaces, and that really comes from what we've grown up with, right?
Yeah, and and I do think I love. Thank you for that. That was a very, very concise explanation of how differences in how work gets done in different markets may impact how employees are showing up or how they're experiencing that. But I love the common underpinning. Like sometimes, like people will come and talk and say, "Well, gosh, I just don't know that this cohort of talent that we're trying to attract or we're trying to grow and develop, they just don't seem as motivated. They seem more, laid back, and they take some of those cues as the underlying motivation for that cohort of people. And I just think that that's super limiting because I think that as humans, we where we spend our time, we want to show up and have an impact. I have a relative to where his father tells a funny story when he was this boy was a teenager and was getting not great marks and at school, and grades weren't what they should be. That my relative said to him, he's like, do you like, what are you looking to get out of life? Like, what are you trying to accomplish here? And his answer was, I'm just looking to be just mediocre. And 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 it's always made me laugh to think about it. I just don't think that anyone comes to work and says, you know what I really want to do today is I want to show up and just be super mediocre. I think we all want to have an impact. I think, and a lot of times we don't quite know how to do that, but I think having that as an underlying thought pattern, I think for leaders is powerful.
Absolutely. I think we've got to be really careful not to make assumptions, or to at least recognize that we're making assumptions at some point. And when I say recognize we're making assumptions, sometimes we make assumptions without realizing that's what we've just done, right? All those biases are really based on assumption. And when we think about the fact that there are 5 different generations in work right now, of course, we're going to have differences of opinion around what work ethic looks like and what is acceptable. So if we find ourselves assuming a particular set of characteristics or trait because of the way someone's behaving, and apply that to an entire generation or an entire cohort, we're at risk of missing the message. And the message there is actually younger people want a better quality of life. And you know what? I think everybody does. I think everybody who is trying to balance life right now wants that. I think this great resignation, or the great reflection, or the great realignment, whatever you call it, I think that's the rest of the world catching up and going, actually, these guys are onto something. Life is bigger than just work, and life is bigger than just work. But work is such a huge chunk of it that I'm with you. I believe that we actually do want to do something worthwhile. We do want to be able to contribute, because human beings essentially want to know that we are valued. We want to be part of a tribe. We want to belong. We want to contribute and be valued. And so, of course, like the very first place we do that is work, right? So let's give everyone an environment where they can actually do that. So my thinking is, if someone's not doing a good job, then or wanting to be mediocre, they're probably in the wrong career. Because when you find something you love, mediocrity isn't even, it's not even on your mind.
And so you spend the thing that I love about where you've chosen to engage
Hmm.
is with leaders, and you're
Hmm.
helping leaders be better leaders. I think. I mean, I subscribe to the philosophy that a lot of times employees don't leave companies; they leave managers. Um,
Absolutely.
and so,
Hmm.
what do you think is what leaders need to improve on? What do they need to learn? What do they need to change in order to really improve the experience that their teams are having?
So honestly, and of course I'm going to say this, right, because I focus on psychological safety and trust,
Yeah.
but I've created this model called psychologically safe performance. And essentially, it's a triangle with performance at the top, psychological safety at the bottom left, trust at the bottom right. And psych safety and trust are the load bearing pillars that enable sustainable performance, right? So I know from experience that it's really tempting to focus on performance. And that's what leaders always do when we have to, right? Because it's about keeping the lights on, keeping people employed, keeping the business relevant and successful, and giving it longevity. But what leaders need to understand is that if you focus on performance, you're actually risking undermining your performance, because often we focus on performance to the exclusion of the very human factors that enable that performance. So what I think leaders really need to understand is the role of psychological safety and trust in being the preconditions or the load-bearing pillars that enable performance to actually happen. And I'll give you a quick theoretical example of that. You know, you'll be familiar with Bruce Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, performing model. A lot of leaders that I speak to think that they're in the performing part of that model. And you're smiling already. Most of them are not. Most of them are still in the storming phase, right? So a lot of people think that they have trust. They think that they understand trust. They think that they have trust in the team. What they have is counterfeit trust, because no one actually feels safe enough to be genuinely vulnerable. Therefore, it's not true vulnerability-based trust. It is counterfeit trust. It's kind of, it's a commitment and a willingness and an anticipation of kind of wanting to trust others and hoping to trust others, but it doesn't actually, it's not grounded in anything real. So it doesn't ever hold, it doesn't ever last, you know? And you'll see this with leaders who think that they've got trust, and if they need to build deeper trust or improve team connection, they'll have team lunches. Team lunches don't help, because team lunches are, you know, few and far between. What matters for leaders is that you think about what you're doing every day. And psych safety and trust, if you're doing that every day, if you're practicing sincerity, if you're practicing connection, competence, consistency, credibility, if you're practicing those things every day and you're role modeling them to your team, then you start to create an entirely different employee experience. You change the way that your employees are showing up, the way that they engage in their work, and the results that you get on the other end of it. So I think psych safety and trust are the two things, or two of the key things that leaders really need to understand to really support a human-centered workplace and to create sustainable engagement and sustainable performance. Because if you're working in a knowledge economy in particular, you know, you need to make it safe for people to speak up and fully participate.
And you know, and I love the visual of psychological safety and trust being these load-bearing pillars of performance. And you know, and the model that you're talking about resonates with me, because it's not, you know, a lot of times, you know, like leaders, like when you didn't want to go to that 3-day session, you're like, I got too much to do. That's all soft. And it's like, but you're tying it back to the language that leaders are, that hold themselves accountable to, which is, look, you want to get the best ideas out there. You want to have a team that's high performing, and ultimately you want to drive outcomes for the business. And so our psychological safety and trust are the, how do they link? You got two pillars, but what's the crossbar look like?
So this is where it starts to get a little bit trickier, right? And this is partly why I created the model, is because psych safety comes first. Psych safety is this. So I see psych safety slightly differently, right? I basically break it down to its brass tacks and say psychological is about what's happening in our mind and our emotions. So it's that dynamic, and safety is about knowing that you're not going to be you're not putting yourself at risk, and you're not causing risk or harm to others. So that's how I view psychological safety, and I think it gives us a really good lens on the post 2020 world, right? Because everything's been stirred up. So psych safety comes first. It's an internal assessment we make based on the level of risk or safety that's in our immediate environment. And that extends to individual relationships with the team and leader, but also our relationship with an organization or the work that we're doing, right? Some of us hate to, because we have relationships with everything, right? With money, with religion, with each other. So psychological safety is this internal, this internal calculation. Am I safe or not? If we are safe, then that permits our, our ability to trust each other. So if we don't have psych safety, we don't trust. So when you see artificial trust, it's absent psychological safety. So psychological safety, so here's how I explain it. Psych safety is the difference between connect and protect in your mind. If you don't feel safe, you're going to protect, which means you're going to be in the limbic part of your brain, which is protect mode, right? You shut down, you retreat, you go quiet, you withhold information, or you can go the other way and you act out. So introverts will kind of pull back. Extroverts often will act out, sabotage, get grumpy, get aggressive. So that's when you can see an absence of psychological safety. You see those behaviors, either withdrawing or acting out. When people feel safe, then they open up and start trusting. The depth of psychological safety shows up in the depth of trust. And then trust is that's what we see, right? Trust is people speaking up. Trust is people doing the work, raising concerns, raising questions, raising potential risks, and closing that say-do gap. So committing and then following through. And from that comes performance. So that then determines the level of performance that you get. So when we have trust, we're moving from that from the protect mode into connect mode. So we move into our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive brain, where all the good stuff happens, right? Innovation, creativity, connection with others, problem solving, all that great stuff happens in our prefrontal cortex, but we can't get there if we don't feel psychologically safe.
So in your model, it really all starts with psychological safety. Like you can't get to trust.
Yeah.
You can't say, I'm going to start with trust and then come back to psychological safety. Your model is actually, it doesn't work. That is the counterfeit trust you were just talking about.
It is. So, and here is the tricky thing. So once you understand all this, it becomes super easy.
Yeah.
But the understanding takes a little bit more time, right? And a little bit more coffee. But the trust. So what leaders need to understand is that they can't necessarily build psychological safety, but they can create the conditions that enable it.
Yes.
Because psych safety is an inside job,
I was going
right?
to say, it's not like you can see what's going on in your head, Teresa. You don't have a little word cloud above your head, right? That we can see.
There's not little speech bubbles going, hey. Yeah. And also, it's not your job, right? So if you were my manager, Brad, it's not your job to gift me psychological safety or make me feel psychologically safe. That's a massive ask, because my psychological safety is it's a combination of everything that's happened in my life up until this point, right? What you can do is create an environment at work that is conducive to psychological safety. So when it comes to psychological safety, the leader's responsibility is create human-centered work environments that remove stress and remove friction. And the other thing leaders need to do is recognize the difference between connect behaviors and protect behaviors. Protect behaviors means they're not feeling safe, and you can explore that. Connect behaviors is when they're leaning in and participating, and you're good to go. But it's when you start seeing those protect behaviors that you need to start thinking about prioritizing trust a little bit more. So trust is actually where leaders take more action, more kind of proactive action, and that becomes about what you're doing every day and consistency. And so it's really about this relationship of creating an environment where people can demonstrate their own competence, credibility, consistency, and connection, but also doing the same in return as a leader. So it's not about one-off, or quarterly experiences for the team. It's about the employee experience every single day. It's what you're doing consistently. How do we communicate? How do we review performance? How do we set targets? How do we discuss, how do we discuss the difficult topics that are coming up, all the risks? How do we hold each other accountable in a way that feels as though it's developmental, not destructive?
I think that this is so fun. Because I'm learning and I'm reflecting on my own professional journey and saying, when did I feel safe? When did I do my best work? And you start to draw parallels and connections in your mind to where, I felt it then. But if I'm being honest with myself, have I been in protect mode in my career before? Yeah, I have.
Right, you can see it. You know what it feels like.
And you're like,
what
I'm just going to hold this part back for right now because
right.
You kind of hold it close and you're like, I think I should probably do this, but no. And you can see how everybody And you're always making that assessment in your head.
It's a constant assessment, and it's natural. It's hardwired into us, right? Because that's what humans do. We deeply want to belong, but we also don't want to be ostracized, hurt, victimized. So we protect ourselves as well. So we're constantly juggling that, and it sounds like it's a really difficult thing for leaders to do, but I promise you, it's not that hard to learn. And it's when you learn it and you nail it, it's so much work becomes so much more fun. Leadership becomes so much easier, and the whole experience, the employee experience for everyone just shifts.
And
It's
and
phenomenal.
so what I love that you dropped a couple nuggets in here that I want to go back and
Hmm.
pull out.
Sure.
And one was on trust, to where you said this is where the leaders are really going to live and where they're going to act. And
Hmm. Hmm.
and the way that you do this isn't by, because a lot of times when teams are struggling, what do I find leaders sometimes ask for? They're like, "Hey, Brad, I need some budget so that I can take my team to lunch, or we got to go do a team building activity."
Team
Yeah.
building.
And
Yeah, yeah.
where I don't know how many billions of dollars are spent globally on team building, that you're making the point that actually doesn't get at the root cause, because it's what
No.
we do every day is what you're saying. So if you've
Hmm.
got a problem with
Absolutely.
trust as a leader, what do I need to do? Do I need to look in the mirror? What do I need to do?
So what you need to do, in the book, one of the things I talk about is there's this really simple model for building trust, right? It's called the four C's. And it's broken into two parts: capability, how you demonstrate your capability, and how you demonstrate your character. So capability is about your competence and your consistency. So are you good at what you're doing? So as a leader, are you a good leader? Are you like, what does a good leader look like in your eyes? And are you doing that? But also, are you doing it consistently? Or do you have good days and bad days, and the team just have to weather whatever is coming? Right? So that's on the capability side, but the character side is around credibility and connection. So connection is around how do you connect with others, how do you build rapport, how do you recognize the humanity in someone else, not just the functional role they're there to deliver. And the credibility is how often are you following through on what you say versus a say do gap. And this is why team lunches and team building doesn't always work, because you fall over at the credibility point, right? You say that you're doing this stuff to create this cohesion across the team and to kind of really change the team dynamic and build morale. But what you end up doing is you have a great time while you're away. You all connect. You have this incredible moment of we're in the trenches together, and oh wow, we're all feeling the same way. And then you go back to work and nothing changes, right? You go out for lunch, you have an amazing team lunch, and then you come back, but the same issues still exist. We're looking at a problem and we're solving the surface problems that are arising. We're not looking at it at the source. We're not tracking it right back to the source and going, actually, what's going wrong here? We have a fundamental lack of trust that's showing up because we're not being consistent and credible in what we're doing. And so we've got to change. And so it really is about what we do every day. So the model, inside that triangle model, there are four other components to it. There's self, team, leader, and system. And each of those components have an influence around psych safety, trust, and performance. So they each play their role in either creating friction or creating ease. And so that's kind of, that's
And the
something that
four
leaders need to be
inside
looking
were
at.
self, team, leader, and what was the last one?
System.
System. Okay. How
Yeah.
it all comes together to work together.
Yeah, and also and system is kind of a lot of the stuff that you guys are working on at Bamboo HR, right? It's all of that stuff that it's the system that we sit within, that we work within. It's the processes that help us to do our work.
Mm.
And if you compare Bamboo HR to some of the other platforms that are out there, there is a different sense of humanity of that Bamboo HR platform. It speaks more to the human-centered design elements than the mechanic kind of corporatized way of just looking at output only. It looks
Yeah.
at an experience as part of the overall outcome, right? So, um,
I think Teresa, as you're talking about that, and we do talk about that as a product team all the time. I mean, our mission is we talk about, we want to set people free to do great work. One of the ways that we do that is as you create do tasks or whatever in Bamboo, we do like to have these little moments of humanity, to where it's like, if you book some paid time off, we're like, bam, like enjoy your holiday. And to where it's little fun things like that, to where it just shows people that, like, hey, there is that in your model. It's can we start to create connection via the system that changes the way people show up?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that most people miss. And so it's one of the things I loved about your system is that it recognizes that there's an opportunity here, a missed opportunity to create connection through the system. And it's not just how you're doing it, but it's also what you do as well. So the frequent touch points for review and accountability is really important as well.
This is like blowing my mind, and the competence consistency, what you do every day. Because yeah, if you go to a great lunch and you have a great time, but you come back and as a leader, you show up the same way. It's like, and every intentional thing you do, you should be like, how am I going to show up differently based on this? And and that connection, I know there were so many times I started my career, Teresa, in financial services, which is not known for valuing humans. And there was one time I remember as a junior employee that I don't know if I gave some feedback on a project or I had something, and the senior partner at the time said, you know what, like where you are in your career, you're a unit of production. We give you things, you do it, you output. And he said it kind of funny. Like I think he was hoping to get a laugh. But thinking about that now, I'm like, actually, I think he believed that in his mind. Like as a person, is like you're not meant to have a human connection. You're just here to get the stuff done. Would you just get it done, please?
And the scary thing about that, Brad, is that I, I I think I was like that before I did the coaching as manager course. And I think a lot of us are. I think a lot of us grow up learning that it's about output, and what we don't ever get taught is that output. It's like a sausage machine, right? Crap in, crap out. So you've got to, if you focus on the quality going in, what you get on the other side feels easy and is remarkable. But yeah, if leaders just think about, it really kind of, at its nub, it comes down to sincerity, right? If you think about how am I showing up? How am I demonstrating my competence and allowing others to demonstrate theirs? Likewise, am I consistent, or do I have days where I'm really not great? And does that mean that actually sometimes I need to not show up on those days or be doing deep work in my office or whatever? But work around it, right? Because humans need to see consistency to be able to trust you. They don't trust in consistency. So it's really those four different, the 4 C's model is really helpful to go, how am I demonstrating these things, and how am I allowing others to demonstrate it themselves? Because we all grew up in a time where we were a function of output. So we were there to create an output. We weren't there to create value. And when you think about creating value rather than creating output, you're thinking about being productive versus being prolific, right? Effective, not efficient. You're thinking about quality, not quantity. And that's and that excites and inspires people, if you give it the right kind of environment for people to get inspired. So
I love the value, because everything we try to do, we try to focus on the outcomes, the value, not the
yeah.
output. Um, and I love that. So let me one final
hmm
question. If I'm a leader and I see signs on my team that the people do not feel
hmm
safe, that we're lacking
hmm
trust, where should I start? Maybe we've had it before and we lost it because I showed up in a non-powerful
hmm
way. But okay, this was a big mental model. What do I do differently tomorrow than I just did today to start on the journey to reestablishing psychological safety, building
Okay.
trust?
So I automatically think about a leader being in a room. So it's the first thing that comes to mind, a leader being in a room with their team. If you sense that you've lost the trust of the team, or there's not psychological safety in the team, then your response is different than if it's an individual. If it's if you notice something, if you notice protective behaviours in an individual, have conversations quietly and discreetly, privately with them, and have conversations
Yeah.
around, hey. So what I recommend to leaders, and what works really well for my clients is if you, is having side conversations with people who are withholding, and saying to them, I noticed that you're not speaking up in the meetings. Your opinion really matters. It's like your voice, your view is a unique one that does matter. And so I want to help you speak up more. What can we do to make that possible? So having those conversations, like, what can I do to help? Help me understand. What can I do to help? How can I help you? When it's a team, it's a little bit different. So when you notice, if you're in a team meeting, this happens, right? And team members are behaving badly and you realize that there's a lack of trust, the best thing you can do is call it out. So whether it's behavior on the team or them not trusting you, be brave and call it out. So, and I have done this when I've been facilitating in person, and I do it when I facilitate online. I call it out and say, I'm noticing a real tension here. Can we just is it just me, or is everyone feeling really uncomfortable? What's the elephant in the room that we're not talking about? What is it that and find discreet ways for them to feed back to you. But if on the flip side of that, you're watching team members behave really poorly in front of each other in a team setting, then just being brave and saying, hey, I get that you're really upset, and that's a really valid opinion. It's coming from somewhere, right? Like, all emotion is information. So as a leader, one of the best things we can do for ourselves is to realize any information you're getting is valuable. Your challenge as a leader is to harness it and convert it into something good, right? So tension is great, but turn it from emotional into creative. So call it out. Say, I love the passion that you're bringing. Right now it feels really edgy. How do we convert that into something that's really useful for us? Like, what do we need to, and this is what I do. I do this with my coaching clients as well. I say to them, okay, so I've heard what you said as XYZ. Is there a question in that? Or what is the core concern or issue that you're worried about in that? So you don't need to tell them off. You don't need to blame them or shame them or anything like that. That's not helpful. But you can say, what's the nugget in there what's the risk that you want us to be aware of? Or what is the question that we need to solve?
So, Teresa, that is, I think it's fantastic and really, really clear for leaders. If you're saying, hey, if you're listening and you are a business leader of a small business or a large business, or you're in HR and you have to coach leaders across your team about how to do this, I think there were some nuggets that you left us in there, Teresa, that are actionable in terms of how we start to show up. So I just want to say thank you, Teresa. This has been just an amazing conversation here on the Era podcast. And love the work that you're doing at Oro Collective. Thank you for being a partner. And for me, hopefully this conversation for everyone was impactful as we think about the employee experience and how that can start to unlock psychological safety and trust, the two weight-bearing pillars of peak performance and the business outcomes that we're looking to drive to. So just been a fantastic conversation. Teresa, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's been such a pleasure.
Okay, and hopefully we'll see you back in the next episode of The Era. Thank you very much for tuning in.